Have you ever wondered why our minds never stop thinking? Why? Even when we want to relax or find stillness, thoughts continuously invade our minds, leaving us feeling stressed and exhausted. Have you ever felt trapped in a whirlwind of endless thoughts, unable to escape? You're definitely not alone. But why does this happen, and how can we take control of it? Welcome to Stillness Unfolded, where we explore the secrets of inner peace and how to achieve calm in the mind. Today, we will dive into a very interesting and important topic. How can we stop and observe our thoughts without letting them control us? This video will share with you how to find the balance between thinking and stillness in the mind, as well as the scientific theories and Buddhist philosophy that can help you break free from the never-ending cycle of overthinking. Join me as we explore these concepts and better understand ourselves. You will learn how to stop getting caught up in meaningless thoughts and start enjoying life more fully. And don't forget, if you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel for more insightful videos. Also, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments so the channel can grow and provide even more high-quality content. This video is packed with valuable and interesting information, so don't miss any part of it. Watch till the end to catch all the insights and apply them to your life. The problem of endless thinking when thoughts take over. Imagine standing in the middle of a crowded, noisy street. The honking of cars, the chatter of people, the constant ringing of phones. It's all happening at once, overwhelming you. But here's the twist. Imagine that this noise is not just external, but internal as well. It's inside your head, constantly bombarding you with thoughts. Every second of your day, your mind is filled with an endless stream of thoughts, whether you want them or not. This is the reality for so many people in today's world. Our minds never stop running. From the moment we wake up, we are greeted by a cascade of thoughts, the plans for the day, regrets from the past, anxieties about the future, and endless to-do lists. It's like the race has already begun before our feet even hit the floor. You don't even need an alarm clock to get you going. Your thoughts serve as a constant, unrelenting reminder of everything that needs to be done and everything that may go wrong. The strange thing is, some of these thoughts are necessary. You might need to remember what time your meeting is, or make sure you pack something important for your day. These thoughts serve a purpose. They help us navigate through the practicalities of life. But most of them are simply noise. They don't help us. They just clutter our minds and distract us from the present moment. They form a continuous stream of chatter that we feel compelled to listen to, even when it's not serving us. Take a moment to reflect. Imagine sitting in a peaceful, serene garden. The air is crisp, the trees rustle softly in the wind, and the sun is shining gently on your face. It's a moment of beauty, a perfect opportunity to be present and embrace the calm around you. But as you sit there, your mind drifts away. You're no longer in the garden. Instead, your thoughts have taken you elsewhere, to work, to a disagreement you had last week, or to a conversation with a friend that left you feeling uneasy. Instead of fully enjoying the tranquility of the moment, you are lost in the noise of your mind. The serenity of the moment slips away, and you are no longer here, but somewhere else, far from the present. This mental noise can be exhausting. It's like carrying a heavy backpack full of stones, unaware of how heavy it is until you finally take it off. Every moment spent caught up in these thoughts adds weight to our mental and emotional load. We carry this unnecessary weight without ever questioning whether we need to. And yet, we keep carrying it every day, thinking that if we keep processing, analyzing, or ruminating, we will find answers. But in reality, all we're doing is making our minds more congested and worn out. In his teachings, the Buddha compared this mental chatter to being struck by two arrows. The first arrow represents the natural pain of life, the suffering that is inevitable, such as loss, failure, or hardship. We all experience this first arrow, and it's a part of the human experience. But then, instead of letting the pain pass, we take a second arrow and stab ourselves. This second arrow represents the extra suffering we create by overthinking, by dwelling on the pain, by asking ourselves, why me? Or why did this happen? The first arrow is unavoidable. It's the pain we feel when something goes wrong, when we face difficulties. But the second arrow, the extra pain we inflict upon ourselves by overanalyzing, ruminating, and worrying, is something we can control. The Buddha taught that while we can't always avoid the first arrow, we have the power to avoid the second. Instead of letting our minds spiral into endless cycles of worry, we can choose to let go, to observe our thoughts without getting entangled in them, and to find peace in the process. Buddhism teaches that when we stop attaching ourselves to every thought that comes into our mind, we break the cycle of suffering. Thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky. They come and go, but we don't have to hold on to them. If we can simply watch them without judgment, without getting involved, the mental noise will gradually fade away, and we'll be able to experience the present moment with clarity and peace. So, the next time your mind is racing, take a deep breath and observe your thoughts. Rather than trying to push them away or engage with them, just let them be. The more we practice this awareness, the easier it becomes to break free from the endless loop of overthinking and embrace the stillness of the present. The first arrow will always come, but we don't have to let the second one follow. The science behind our constant thoughts, the default mode network. But why does our mind seem to never stop? Why is it so hard to quiet the endless stream of thoughts that constantly fill our heads? The answer lies partly in the biology of our brain. Neuroscientists have identified a phenomenon called the default mode network, DMN, which is at the heart of this incessant mental chatter. This network activates when we are not focused on an external task, when we are idle or simply daydreaming. It's as though it's a radio constantly playing in the background of our minds, reminding us of past events, worrying about the future, and bringing up unresolved concerns from the past. The DMN isn't a flaw in our brain's design. It's an essential part of how our minds function. It helps us navigate the world by keeping us engaged with our memories, plans, and emotions. It's our brain's way of processing experiences, reflecting on what's happened, and preparing for what might happen next. However, the problem arises when the DMN becomes overactive, when it's constantly running. Even when we are trying to focus, it can feel like we are constantly bombarded with mental noise. Think about how overwhelming it feels when you're sitting quietly, trying to relax, but your mind keeps pulling you in every direction. Thoughts about what you should have done earlier, fears about something in the future, judgments about yourself, and so on. This is the default mode network in action. It's not something we can simply turn off with a switch. The more we try to suppress it, the more persistent it becomes. For many people, silence feels almost unnatural or uncomfortable. We have been conditioned to believe that more thinking means more control, more solutions, and ultimately, better functioning in life. This constant thinking is deeply ingrained in our neural wiring, and it has its roots in how humans have evolved. For our ancestors, the ability to constantly think and anticipate future scenarios, to reflect on past mistakes and learn from them, was a survival mechanism. It helped us avoid dangers, plan for the future, and understand the consequences of our actions. While that kind of thinking was adaptive in survival situations, in modern life, it can become counterproductive. We are now facing a world where our minds never rest, and this constant mental chatter can lead to stress, anxiety, and burnout. The Buddha, however, offers us a liberating perspective on this constant stream of thoughts. Just because our minds are continuously thinking doesn't mean we have to be controlled by them. One of the core teachings of Buddhism revolves around mindfulness, the practice of observing our thoughts without getting entangled in them. Rather than fighting against the mind's constant flow or trying to suppress our thoughts, Buddhism teaches us to step outside of our thoughts, to see them as they are, and to simply observe them. By doing so, we can find freedom. In one of his profound teachings, the Buddha asked a student, "Where is your mind right now?" The student replied, "It's thinking about many things." The Buddha smiled and said, "If you can see your thoughts, then you are already aware." This simple exchange carries a profound insight. Awareness is not the absence of thoughts, but the ability to notice them without becoming attached to them. When we are mindful, we don't need to control or suppress our thoughts. Instead, we become the observer. We become the witness to the constant parade of thoughts without being swept away by them. This awareness, this detachment from the continuous mental chatter, is where the peace lies. The practice of mindfulness meditation is one way to cultivate this awareness. Through meditation, we learn to become more aware of our thoughts and feelings, noticing when our mind starts to drift into the usual patterns of worry and distraction. Rather than engaging with these thoughts, we simply observe them without judgment. Over time, This practice helps us build the skill to recognize our thoughts as they arise, without letting them control us. It's like learning to watch a movie without getting emotionally involved in every scene. We can sit back and appreciate the film, knowing that it is just a series of fleeting images. In essence, the Buddhist teachings encourage us to stop identifying with our thoughts and to understand that thoughts are not who we are. We are not the sum of our worries, regrets, or future anxieties. Thoughts are transient. They come and go like clouds in the sky. Our true nature, the Buddha suggests, is like the vast sky itself, always present, always open, always free from the turbulence of individual clouds. By understanding this, we can begin to release the grip that our thoughts have on us. We can stop being enslaved by them and learn to live with greater peace and presence. The more we practice mindfulness, the easier it becomes to simply notice our thoughts without becoming overwhelmed by them. Instead of being consumed by an endless internal dialogue, we begin to experience moments of stillness and clarity, where we are fully immersed in the present moment, free from the relentless noise of the DMN. In this way, the practice of mindfulness offers a profound solution to the endless thinking that plagues so many of us. We don't need to silence our thoughts entirely. We simply need to shift our relationship with them. By becoming the observer, we can reclaim our peace and find the space to just be. Observing, not engaging, a mindful approach. Now, let's take this one step further. Imagine your mind as a fast-moving car. You're in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, desperately trying to control the speed, the direction, the flow. You constantly adjust, trying to steer it away from the obstacles and keep it on the right track. It's a continuous battle. The more you try to control the car, the more exhausting it becomes, and yet the more chaotic the ride seems. The faster it goes, the harder it is to make sense of it all. You feel overwhelmed, trapped in the struggle, as though you're losing control. But now, imagine something different. Picture yourself standing on the sidewalk, watching that same car zoom past. You're not trying to stop it or even control it. You're simply observing it as it passes by, taking note of its movement without reacting. The car is still speeding along, but your stance has shifted. Instead of being inside it, desperately trying to steer, you're standing outside, watching it move through space. It no longer controls you. This is the essence of mindfulness. Mindfulness isn't about forcing your mind to stop thinking, nor is it about suppressing your thoughts. It's about recognizing that thoughts are like clouds in the sky. They come, they pass, and they fade away. We don't need to grasp at them or attach any meaning to them. We don't need to invest our energy in fighting them or trying to control them. We simply observe. This subtle shift in perspective is transformative. Instead of engaging with every thought that arises, believing that we must act upon each one, analyze it, or become overwhelmed by it, mindfulness invites us to step back and watch. Just as we watch clouds float by in the sky, we watch our thoughts come and go. The key is in the observation, not in the involvement. From a scientific perspective, mindfulness has been shown to quiet the default mode network, DMN, in the brain, which is the system responsible for our constant stream of thoughts and self-referential thinking. Think of it like a radio that has been blaring in the background, the static, the noise, the endless chatter that fills our minds. With mindfulness, we turn down the volume on that radio. The thoughts are still there. They don't vanish, but they no longer control us. They no longer dictate our emotional state or drive our actions. We regain our freedom from the mental noise. This is a profound realization. We are not our thoughts. Our thoughts come and go, like passing clouds, and they don't define us. Peace doesn't mean silencing the mind. It means understanding that our thoughts are temporary phenomena. They arise, and then they dissolve. They are not permanent fixtures in our identity. Our true nature, the essence of who we are, is like the sky, vast, open, and free. In practice, this can be incredibly freeing. When we begin to observe our thoughts without engaging with them, we stop identifying so strongly with them. Often, we believe that our thoughts are who we are, that our worries, our fears, or our plans somehow define us. But mindfulness allows us to see that thoughts are just passing mental events, like ripples on the surface of water. They are not the water itself. For example, you may have a thought, "I'm not good enough." In the past, you might have latched onto that thought, believed it, and let it shape your feelings about yourself. It may have caused stress or self-doubt, and perhaps even dictated your behavior. But through mindfulness, you begin to observe that thought from a place of non-attachment. I'm not good enough is just a thought. It's not a fact. It's not the core of who you are. You don't need to act on it or even believe it. It's simply a cloud passing through your mental sky. Mindfulness encourages us to treat thoughts like passing visitors. They arrive, they stay for a moment, and then they leave. When we stop clinging to them, we create space for greater peace and freedom. This shift allows us to respond to life with more clarity, rather than reacting from a place of emotional turmoil or habitual thinking. This process of observing without engaging is often referred to as mindful awareness. When you practice mindful awareness, you're creating space between stimulus and response. In other words, you begin to notice the thought before it triggers an emotional or physical response. This space, even if it's just a few seconds, gives you the opportunity to choose how to respond, instead of reacting automatically based on past experiences or emotional conditioning. In addition, mindfulness has a physiological effect. Research has shown that regular mindfulness practice can reduce activity in the default mode network, which is linked to overthinking, rumination, and self-referential thinking. As we begin to step outside our thoughts and observe them, our brains rewire themselves to reduce the constant chatter and foster a state of calm and presence. In this way, mindfulness is not about shutting down the mind or denying the presence of thoughts. Instead, it's about learning to see thoughts for what they are, transient and impermanent. It's about understanding that we do not need to identify with every passing mental event. This is where true peace lies, not in the absence of thoughts, but in the ability to observe them without becoming attached. This awareness is liberating. It allows us to experience life more fully, with clarity and presence, because we are no longer lost in the mental noise. Instead of being overwhelmed by our thoughts, we become the observer, watching them come and go with equanimity and without attachment. The experience of a quiet mind. What happens when thinking slows down? When you're deeply immersed in something, whether it's walking through a forest, listening to your favorite piece of music, or simply spending time with loved ones, you may notice that your mind begins to slow down. For a brief moment, the constant stream of thoughts that usually fills your head fades away. In that stillness, there's a profound sense of peace that emerges. It's a quiet that comes after the storm has passed, or like the fresh, clean air that fills the environment after a heavy rain. Everything feels sharper, clearer, lighter, and more vibrant, as if a veil has been lifted and you can finally see the world in its true colors. This sensation is what it feels like when thinking slows down. It's a moment of mental calmness, and it's not something we experience very often in our fast-paced, constantly busy lives. But when that incessant mental chatter quiets, the usual pressures, the pressure to plan, to remember, to worry about the future or dwell on the past, begin to dissipate. There's a lightness that follows, as if the weight of 1,000 concerns has been lifted off your shoulders. You may notice that your body starts to relax as well. Your shoulders, which were once tense from stress, begin to soften. The clenching in your jaw loosens. Even your fists, which you might not have realized were tightly balled, open up. Letting go of unnecessary thoughts is like releasing a physical grip on the body. It's a relief, a relaxation that spreads through your entire being. You didn't realize how much mental and physical tension you were holding onto until you let it go. The absence of overthinking creates a space where you can simply be, and in that space, there is freedom. When our minds quiet down, something truly transformative happens. We start to experience the world as it truly is. Without the constant narrative running in our heads, we are able to see and feel things more clearly. This is what Zen Buddhism refers to as beginner's mind. It's the ability to approach the world without preconceived notions, labels, or judgments. A fresh, open-minded way of seeing life. It's like a child's first encounter with snow. They don't analyze it or try to understand its composition. They don't ask, why does it fall like this? Or what temperature does it freeze at? Instead, they simply feel the snowflakes on their skin, notice the way it glistens in the sunlight, and revel in its beauty. There's no rush to categorize, no pressure to understand everything at once. They are simply immersed in the experience. This beginner's mind is a powerful tool for deepening our connection to life. It's the direct experience of life, free from the clutter of unnecessary thought. In this state, we are no longer weighed down by mental filters that distort our perceptions. Without our habitual judgments, fears, and expectations clouding our vision, we can experience the world more vividly, more authentically. Every color seems brighter, every sound sharper, every texture more pronounced. At this moment, when the mind slows down, we experience an awakening. We begin to notice the raw beauty of the world around us that we've often overlooked in the midst of our thoughts. The fragrance of a flower, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the subtle warmth of the sun on our skin. All of these things become more intense, more vivid. Our sensory experiences become more alive and real because they are no longer being dulled by the noise of our thinking. This is not just a temporary moment of stillness. With practice, these moments can become more frequent, more extended. We don't need to retreat into a forest or go on a spiritual retreat to access this feeling. It's available to us at any moment when we choose to step out of the constant flow of thought and just be present with what is. And when we do, the world opens up to us in a new, profound way. The practice of mindfulness, the ability to observe our thoughts without getting caught up in them, is the key to cultivating this kind of experience. When we start to quiet the endless mental chatter, we stop identifying with every passing thought. We stop seeing ourselves as the sum of our thoughts, worries, and memories. We start to realize that our true nature is much more expansive than the thoughts running through our minds. In that stillness, we find ourselves more connected to the world, to others, and to our own deepest selves. We experience the richness of life without being overwhelmed by the constant noise of the mind. The shift from thinking to experiencing is subtle but powerful, allowing us to live with more peace, more clarity, and more joy. This is the profound beauty of a quiet mind. When we learn to slow down the thinking, we open ourselves up to the present moment. And in that moment, we find freedom, peace, and a deep sense of connection to the world around us. The illusion of the self. Who are we without our thoughts? When the mind slows down, something even deeper begins to unfold. As we begin to step outside of our constant stream of thoughts, the sense of I, that familiar self-identity that says, I am this person, I am successful, I am not good enough, starts to dissolve. We realize that this I is not a solid, fixed entity. It is merely a collection of thoughts, memories, and comparisons. As the noise in our minds quiets, the I becomes less defined and starts to fade into the background. This process is subtle yet transformative. The more we detach from the constant thinking that constructs our sense of self, the more we see that our identity is not something permanent or static. It is a fluid, ever-changing narrative. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are, our strengths, weaknesses, successes, and failures, are just that, stories. They are not the essence of who we are. They are layers of thought that we have accumulated over time, and they continuously shift based on new experiences, judgments, and perceptions. When we stop identifying with these thoughts, something profound happens. We begin to see that the I is just an illusion. It is a mental construct we hold on to, an idea we constantly reinforce by believing the thoughts that pass through our minds. The I we cling to is not an unchanging, permanent entity. Rather, it is a collection of transient ideas, constantly in flux. One moment, we might feel confident and successful, and the next, we might feel insecure or inadequate. This shows us that the self is not fixed. It's a series of thoughts and emotional reactions that we continuously create. This realization is at the heart of one of Buddhism's central teachings, the illusion of the self. The Buddhist teachings revolve around the idea that the self, the ego, is not real. It is an illusion that we have created, and it is this attachment to the illusion of a fixed self that causes suffering. When we define ourselves by our thoughts, memories, and perceptions, we become trapped in a cycle of self-judgment, comparison, and emotional turbulence. We cling to an identity that is constantly shifting, and in doing so, we set ourselves up for pain. The Buddha taught that the root of suffering lies in our attachment to the idea of I and me. We attach to our thoughts, our roles, our possessions, and our accomplishments as if they define who we are. But the truth is, these are all fleeting and impermanent. When we identify ourselves with these temporary aspects of life, we create a sense of separation from others and from the world around us. We begin to believe that we are separate, isolated beings, defined by our achievements, failures, and characteristics. The realization that the self is an illusion is liberating. It doesn't mean we lose our individuality or become empty. Instead, it frees us from the need to constantly defend and protect the false self we've created. It allows us to let go of the stories we tell about who we are, the judgments we place on ourselves, and the expectations we carry. By releasing our attachment to the I, we begin to experience life in a more open, fluid, and authentic way. This insight helps us to live with greater freedom and ease. We no longer need to constantly prove ourselves or seek validation from others because we understand that our worth isn't tied to the stories we tell about ourselves. We can let go of the belief that we must be something or someone in particular. Instead of identifying with the ego, we can simply be. We become more connected to the present moment, to others, and to the world around us. Letting go of the illusion of the self doesn't mean that we disappear or become less of who we are. It simply means we stop clinging to an identity that causes suffering. The more we let go of the false self, the more we reconnect with our true nature, a nature that is vast, open, and free. The more we release the need to define ourselves, the more we can experience life without the filters of self-doubt, comparison, and judgment. The practice of mindfulness and meditation is a powerful way to begin this process. By observing our thoughts without getting caught up in them, we create space between the thought and our reaction. Over time, we can see that thoughts are not who we are. They are just temporary mental events that arise and fade. As we detach from them, the grip of the false self loosens, and we begin to experience a greater sense of peace and freedom. In essence, the Buddhist teaching encourages us to let go of the need to define ourselves through our thoughts and to release the attachment to the I. By doing so, we are not losing ourselves. We are freeing ourselves from the confines of an illusion. In this freedom, we can experience life more fully, more authentically, and more deeply. We are no longer bound by the false self we've constructed. Instead, we are free to simply be, to exist in the present moment without clinging to any idea of who we think we are. And in that freedom, we find true peace. The middle way, finding balance between thought and stillness. Thinking is not the enemy. In fact, it is an essential tool we use to navigate the world, solve problems, and create. We rely on it to make decisions, plan for the future, and make sense of our experiences. Without thinking, we would be unable to accomplish even the simplest tasks in life. However, like any tool, thinking can be misused. When we overuse it, become trapped in endless analysis, or let it control us, it no longer serves its purpose. It becomes a source of suffering. The key, as with all things in life, is balance. In Buddhism, the middle way is a path between extremes. It is about finding harmony and equilibrium in all areas of life, including our relationship with our thoughts. Some people fall into the trap of overthinking. They analyze every detail, constantly calculating, predicting, and trying to solve problems in their minds. They become lost in the labyrinth of their own thoughts, and this constant mental activity leads to stress, confusion, and burnout. On the other hand, there are those who reject thinking altogether. They believe that the mind is the source of all suffering and try to suppress or eliminate it. However, this approach can be just as harmful, leading to avoidance, suppression of emotions, and a lack of clarity or purpose. Neither extreme leads to wisdom or true freedom. True wisdom, according to the Buddha, comes from knowing when to think and when to be still. The key is not to fight against thought itself, but to develop a balanced relationship with it. The Noble Eightfold Path offers guidance on how to cultivate this balance, particularly in the practice of right thought. Right thought isn't about suppressing the mind or avoiding thinking altogether. Rather, it is about cultivating thoughts that are free from harmful attachments, judgments, and desires. It's about recognizing that not all thoughts are necessary or helpful, and that we can choose which ones to engage with and which ones to let go. In modern psychology, Particularly in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, we learned that not all thoughts are true or helpful. Some thoughts distort our perception of reality, leading us to catastrophize, ruminate, or dwell on worst-case scenarios. These unhelpful thoughts can create unnecessary stress and anxiety. On the other hand, there are thoughts that bring clarity, insight, and problem-solving ability. These thoughts help us make better decisions and navigate life more effectively. The Buddha's teaching mirrors this concept. Think when it is useful, but do not be a slave to your thoughts. The middle way teaches us that we should not be ruled by our thoughts, nor should we ignore them entirely. Instead, we must learn to observe them with awareness and discernment. When a thought arises, we can ask ourselves whether it is helpful or harmful. Does it bring us closer to clarity, peace, and understanding? Or does it drag us into worry, confusion, or fear? In practicing right thought, we choose to focus on the thoughts that serve our well-being and let go of those that only cause unnecessary distress. For example, when facing a difficult situation, overthinking can lead to paralysis and indecision. We may replay the same thoughts over and over, trying to solve the problem in our minds, but getting nowhere. This overthinking causes mental exhaustion and makes it harder to see the situation clearly. In contrast, practicing mindfulness, observing the thoughts without getting caught up in them, helps us gain a clearer perspective. We can still think through the problem, but we do so with awareness, letting go of any unproductive or negative thoughts that might cloud our judgment. Similarly, in moments of quiet reflection, it's important to not suppress the mind entirely, but to let the thoughts arise and pass naturally without clinging to them. We do not need to force ourselves into a state of total silence or void of thought. Instead, we can allow the mind to settle, observing the natural ebb and flow of thoughts without reacting to them. This is where true freedom lies, in being aware of the mind's constant activity and yet not being attached to it. The middle way encourages us to live in a state of balance, where thinking is a tool we use when necessary, but it does not dominate our experience. We are not at the mercy of our thoughts, nor are we suppressing them in an effort to avoid discomfort. Instead, we cultivate a mind that is clear, discerning, and free from excessive attachment or avoidance. This approach brings true peace and clarity as we learn to navigate life with the wisdom of knowing when to think and when to simply be. In this way, the Buddha's teachings offer us a way to cultivate mental freedom by engaging with our thoughts mindfully, with intention, and with awareness. By practicing the middle way, we develop the ability to live with greater ease, clarity, and purpose. We use our minds to serve us, not to trap us, and we experience true liberation from the endless cycle of overthinking. So, we've explored the secrets of how to stop and observe our thoughts, and we've delved into how to develop stillness in the mind. From Buddhist teachings to scientific research, we've gained a deeper understanding of how to control and effectively use our thoughts. What you've learned today could completely transform the way you view your own life and mind. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos. We also really value your feedback, so please share your thoughts in the comments to help us improve and bring you more quality content. Remember, every small step in the journey to explore stillness and understand your mind will bring you closer to true peace and happiness. Thank you for watching until the end, and we hope you will apply what you've learned to live a life of greater calm and serenity.